This episode of Conducting Pills will descend into the circles of hell through the imagination of Liszt in his Dante Symphony. Hi, I'm Gianmaria Griglio, I'm a conductor and a composer, and welcome to this new episode of Conducting Pills, a series where we look into a classical piece or a part of it and outline its structure and phrasing, orchestration, and harmony, with a bonus occasional technical tips for conductors. I want to take a second to thank all my supporters and to remind you that on my Patreon page you can find the full episodes of Conducting Pills and the extra episodes tackling technical aspects on top of the live sessions and many other Patreon perks. Now, let's begin. As much as Franz Liszt is one of the most prominent figures in classical music, his popularity is largely due to his skills as a pianist and to the extent to which he took the piano technique in his compositions. And yet, like all geniuses, he had a fervent imagination who took him into different directions throughout his life. One of his goals was to redefine symphonic music. In short, the creation of a programmatic piece that would incorporate a story or a mood and combine the form of the overture and of the first movement of a classical symphony. By the way, the idea of telling a story in music, describing a situation, an emotion, or a character is a concept that was very dear to another composer, Richard Wagner. And incidentally, Wagner and Liszt knew each other very well, having Wagner married Liszt's daughter, Cosima. If you travel to Bayreuth, Wagner's temple, you'll be able to visit both Liszt and Wagner's houses, which are facing one another and have now been turned into museums. Despite the title, this work is not really a symphony, at least not in the classical sense of it. Liszt had started sketching themes for this work since the early 1840s. I will undertake a composition based on Dante's comedy he wrote in February 1839. The premiere of the symphonic poem at the Dresden Hoftheater on November 7, 1857, shortly after the conclusion of the composition, was a disaster because of the absolutely inadequate rehearsals. Liszt, who had conducted the orchestra himself, was publicly humiliated. This did not prevent him from preparing better the next time around, March 11, 1858, in Prague, with the distribution of a program that prepared the audience for the unusual form of this two-part composition. The structure of the first movement, dedicated to the descent of Dante and Virgil through the circles of hell, is in sonata form. As well as the Divine Comedy, it can be divided into various episodes, the main of which is dedicated to Paolo and Francesca, the fifth canto in the comedy. The movement opens slowly with three themes described in the verses engraved on the door of hell. Per me si va nella città dolente, per me si va nell'eterno dolore, per me si va tra la perduta gente. Lasciate ogni speranza voi che entrate. Which translates to, through me is the way to the sorrowful city, through me is the way to the eternal sorrow, through me is the way among the lost people. Abandon all hope, you who enter here. The first theme begins in D minor, a key that Liszt associates with hell, but ends in an ambiguous G sharp, 3 tones above, the famous or infamous tritone, an interval traditionally connected with the devil. As a curiosity, this belief was related to the fact that this particular interval was diabolically difficult to sing properly, and as such should be avoided in correct compositional practices. In the Middle Ages, it was known as diabolus in musica, devil in music. The second theme, closely related to the first, also ends in G sharp, this time without ambiguity. Finally, the third theme begins in E, continues with the strings in C sharp, and ends with an ambiguous diminished seventh in G sharp. Notice this rhythmic figure, punctuating both the first and the third theme. It's played on 2 timpani, and the tam-tam, a very intense and dark color, and returns in various forms throughout the movement. The strings later introduce a motif derived from the first theme, associated with the descent of Dante and Virgil through hell's circles. A brass motif is also derived from the third theme and punctuates the passage. Notice how in this introduction everything is pushed to the limit. Fortissimo with the 3 Fs, forzato, accents, spelled out indications such as violent and marcato. It starts in D minor again, but the key seems ambiguous. This accelerating section reaches a frenetic allegro at the climax, and look at the tempo marking. It's literally marked allegro frenetico, which gives you an idea of how unsettling the atmosphere needs to be. The theme is also derived, quite obviously, from the same ascending and descending semitones idea we heard in the introduction. The tempo increases to presto molto, and the second subject is played by wind and strings over a pedal on the dominant A. No references to Dante's verses appear in the score, but it's quite reasonable to imagine this exposition as representing the Vestibule and the limbo, the scenario that opens to Dante and Virgil right after Hell's doors. The transition between the two subjects could represent the crossing of the river Styx. Dante and Virgil move deeper into hell. The infernal wind that eternally buffets the damned is represented by ascending and descending chromatic scales of strings and flutes. This is followed by a 5/4 almost andante ma sempre un poco mosso. It begins with harps glissandos with strings and woodwinds in chromatic figurations, again recalling the wind section. The explicit reference is to the Dante episode of Paolo and Francesca. Francesca da Rimini was forced into a political marriage with Giovanni Malatesta, but fell in love with his younger brother, Paolo. The affair was discovered by Giovanni, who killed them both. Dante meets them in the circle of hell reserved for the lustful. Here, the couple is trapped in an eternal whirlwind, doomed to be forever swept through the air just as they allowed themselves to be swept away by their passions. After a short passage based on a theme derived from the recitative, an andante amoroso of a passionate theme in 7/4 follows. Now, both the orchestration and harmony are curious. Liszt creates a dialogue between all the violins, muted, and a couple of violins, unmuted. And the key signature suggests an F-sharp major, a key that Liszt associates with the divine, but the theme actually begins in D-sharp minor, a very odd tonality, and moves to F-sharp minor and A minor. We transition to the seventh circle through a return of the Lasciato ogni speranza theme. A short cadenza for harp, which continues the infernal wind motives, leads to a passage about which Liszt wrote, "The whole passage is intended to be a blasphemous mocking laughter," probably with a reference to the character of Capaneo. The dominant motives are repetitions of passages already heard previously. The time signature reverts to alla breve. The key signature is cancelled, and the tempo quickens to tempo primo in preparation for the recapitulation. After a recapitulation that perhaps represents the 8th and 9th circles, in which the first subject is recalled by augmentation, the tempo accelerates to a climax, and the second subject is repeated with a little change. Another climax leads to the coda, dominated by the second subject and the descent motive. And the latter leads to an even more intense climax, molto fortissimo. In the last 10 bars, the motive Lasciato ogni speranza returns while Dante and Virgil emerge from the opposite side of the world at the feet of the mountain of purgatory. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button right below the video and ring the bell so you will get notified every time a new video comes out. If you want to support the show monetarily, you can do so on my Patreon page, and if you're interested in conducting technique, follow my Facebook group. All the links are in the description. Let me know in the comments what you think about this piece, and if you have any suggestions for future videos, and I look forward to seeing you next week with a new episode of Conducting Pills, when we'll go through the second part of Liszt's Dante Symphony. And meanwhile, please continue to enjoy music, and be well. Ciao. Everything is low. Now, this tells us right away that we should be conducting in the mid-low area and not all the way up here. When you're all the way up here, you're missing out on the weight that this score is calling for, the orchestration is calling for.